So, there is a scenario in which demographics solve this problem if we're lucky and we can kind of get through it without disasters like Sarah Palin and McCain dying of an aneurysm. I don't think it's worth. I really think it's a distraction. I don't. I mean, it's a perfectly reasonable question, but I think speculation about probability is a distraction because as long as that number is anything over 12. I mean, if you were a Jew living in Germany in 1930 and we were having this discussion, and the guys in the front of the room said, "Well, I think the probability the Nazis will win is only 25%." Would you go home and sleep well at night? No. I mean, to me, any number means that we have a responsibility to step up and make sure it doesn't happen. I don't care whether it's 12 or 20 or 25 or 40. To me, as long as it's a real chance and the consequences being so drastic, that's what to me drives that sense of personal responsibility. We have to step up and do something. Yes, sir.
I'd like to say a little more optimistic about this. With younger people, and in general, the secular movement has grown. I mean, noting how statistics are going up significantly. A lot of them are people that might have been secular previously, but were afraid to respond to such a survey. But the mere fact that people are allowed or feel comfortable admitting to such a thing, I think is encouraging. And I think that a lot of the legislation and things that are getting passed right now are the dying breath of some people that know that they better get it passed or keep it down now because they're not going to be able to do it as a generation comes up, such as gay marriage and things like that. They know that it's basically a war of attrition. They're going to lose.
I certainly hope you're. I hope you're right.
They don't give. We give. That's the trouble. They refuse to give. I've been in arguments for thousands of hours with these people to try to change even a little bit of understanding about evolution. And the real believers, of which there are so many that you can't even believe how many there are even in this area, they don't, at the end, it's the same.
Right. Well, that's why I said in my view, it's demographics that's going to change, not them changing their mind. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I lost a bet, so I had to watch the Values Voter Summit. And no, but it scared the hell out of me. And the thing that really blew my mind was Michelle Bachmann talked about, we got to do something about these Americans that are going over to join ISIS. And we should take this citizenship away from anyone who fights as a terrorist. So you're going to set up a situation where anybody that the government says is a terrorist, they'll just take their citizenship. I mean, that's scary to me.
It is scary. I mean, the one thing I didn't talk about here, but it becomes clear in the book, actually the legislative path to the theocracy is based on bills that were tabled in the House of Representatives in 2004 and 2005 and received plurality but not majority votes. So all of these instruments, what's happened with the war on terror and the Patriot Act and the surveillance, every tool that is used in my book to implement the authoritarian theocracy is a tool that's in the works already. Yes, sir.
The psychology interests me. Everybody seems to want to be able to be certain, just plain certain. And the fundamentalists don't seem to be willing to concede the possibility, I could be wrong. I'm only me. They don't realize that what they are grasping as God is a conception on their own part. They don't know. They don't seem to be willing to. Oh, I did want to quote Protagoras. Faced with a bunch of fundamentalists in 550 BC, he said even if one were to stumble across the absolute truth, he would himself not know it.
Right. Well, you make a very fundamental point, and you notice that I said that one of the things that we have trouble understanding is that for them, faith is a type of knowledge. So if you said to me right now, we are in room 404 of the Free Public Library in Philadelphia, and I challenge that proposition, you know, you would fight back because you would say, no, this is not an opinion, this is not a belief, it's a type of knowledge. That's how they perceive it. Now, we know that it's not a type of knowledge.
No, I take a different tack.
Mm-hmm.
It is a type of knowledge, and so is being here a type of knowledge, and it's all fallible. No knowledge is certain, whether it's religious or not.
Okay, well, that's a healthy view. Yes, sir.
Isn't our country moving more in the opposite direction where Christian is having less influence on government, where like before 1963 prayer in school was pretty much widely accepted as just something that's okay, and now it's pretty much been outlawed. Homosexuals like have far more rights than ever before, and like Jews are pretty much widely accepted. There's less oppression of African Americans.
No, you make an excellent point. You know, one of the key themes in the book, one of the key problems of this thing is perspective. Perspective. What's the right perspective to have on all this? And you just gave us a very useful, you know, piece of perspective, right? I said 944 laws to ban, and you say, well, wait a second, you know, in 20 years ago, it was banned, right? I mean, we didn't have Roe v. Wade, and we had laws against contraception, and there was prayer in schools, and you know, sodomy was illegal, and you know, you know, that is an important perspective, and yes, but you know, history goes in, you know, waves. I mean, if you believe as I do in a kind of progressive, you know, it's a couple steps back, forward, a step back, a couple steps forward, and it is a question of perspective. And you're right. I'll tell you one thing I find very hopeful. Look at how quickly the national view on marriage equality changed. I mean, go back. There are two things that I think are incredibly hopeful. Think of the civil rights movement. You know, a lot of people here I can see from the age were actually, you know, conscious in the 1960s. And, you know, think back to your own parents and grandparents and talk about fixed views and knowledge. Think of their views on race. Just think of, these were people you loved, right? Think of what their views were on race. And think of how that change that happened in society, and I'm not saying, you know, the race problem is gone, but to take your thing, I mean, we had a pivot. We had a, you know, it took a generation, you know, for an incredible mental, cultural pivot on the question of race. And then we had in marriage equality, in the course of 2 years, the change in the national polling data is incredible on that. So it shows that even though prejudices and beliefs can be very deeply held, they can be changed. But a lot of that is you're right. So it's a question of perspective.
The Ku Klux Klan was once a mainstream organization.
Exactly. He said the Ku Klux Klan was once a mainstream organization.
Well,
Yes.
I like your opinion of things that concern me. A, the concentration of wealth now in some of these mega churches, who also, as you said, with theater, will have the theme parks. So kids go through and they really feel they met this nice Jesus and everyone else. So that concentration of money, I think they've been at some other meeting, people are buying up land, they're all tax-free. Whenever you get that wealth, that concerns me. The other thing is the person who said, we have a lot more sectarians. Yes, youngs are not going to church, but that doesn't mean, I think, with a lot of the studies, that they don't believe in a God or something. It's just that right now, these people are not organized around a certain church. And the way waves happen, they can all of a sudden, if something happens. Now, these people who believe can all be drawn to that other group with all the money and the power and a lot of things.
You make an interesting point. You know, part of the explanation here is what's often referred to as imbalance of passion and an imbalance of resources, the two factors that you raise. And you know, the people in this room have a lot of passion. I think most people here are probably pretty, to get up on a Thursday night and come into Philadelphia, you know, you must have some real interest and passion in secularism and separation of church and state. But look, we're 25 people or so sitting, you know, on the 4th floor of a library in Philadelphia. The you know, mega churches, you know, are turning out 10,000, for whom that mega church experience is the center of their life. The megachurch is fascinating. If you follow that phenomenon, you know, it started in the South, right? If you sort of take the Southern Baptist Convention. But the speed with which it moved north into these suburbs, and a lot of it, you know, and again, I'm not a professional sociologist, but if you read a lot of it, it was this kind of alienation of suburban life. People were in these pretty, you know, difficult places. There was no village. A lot of the connections that people had with people were lost. The mega churches came in and they supplied something that was missing, a sense of community. And so this imbalance of passion, yeah, I mean, you know, this room has passion, but it's not like the passion in that other church. And money, look at Americans United. What's the annual budget of Americans United, you know, nationally?
About 12 million.
The Delaware Valley chapter is about $600.
I mean,
not
if we
a
were a
lot.
mega church tonight, by the way, you wouldn't leave without emptying your wallets, because the mega churches are superb at that. And they'd raise, you know, $100 grand, you know, and just like that. Right.
I keep hearing about how more and more people are identifying as non-religious, younger people. But what I think's happening is the people that are religious are they're digging their heels in, they're getting crazy. And not to be like weird, but they are reproducing like crazy. The Quiverful movement and all that stuff they do, they have a ton of kids. I'm a secular homeschooler. I joined a homeschool group a couple years ago for like one day. Those people are insane. They have like 5, 6, 7, 8 kids, and I have one, and my sister has one. All my secular friends have 1, 2 kids at most. And I think that my atheist friends are lazy. They go, I'm an atheist, I don't feel like doing anything. Like they're so I have so many friends that are atheists that won't get involved and they don't care and they're lazy.
That's the imbalance of passion.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
The Great Britain, the state church, I think, is Anglicanism. In Sweden and Norway, it's still Lutheranism, and it means absolutely nothing because they're secular societies.
Right.
So say if Protestant evangelicalism became the state religion, how would that affect everybody who's not a Protestant evangelical?
Right. Well, I mean, there are 2 layers of answers to that question. I'm sure many people in this room could answer. I mean, first of all, most people here would say it is completely antithetical with the nature of American life and the American Constitution, which is supposed to be religiously neutral. Right. You know, the change. I mean, you know, if you're in one of those societies and you're not from the prevailing religion, you know, you're a second-class citizen. And I mean, of course, secular people have been second-class citizens in this country. So one is this the kind of emotional status, identity. But the other one is they're not content with symbolic gestures, right? They're not content. The legislation, the Constitution Restoration Act basically provides that it is unlawful for any federal court to hear any matter premised on separation of church or state or that challenges God and the Bible as the sovereign source of authority in America. This is legislation that attracted hundreds of votes in the U.S. House of Representatives. In my book, it gets adopted. But that basically, and this, by the way, is Constitution. This is why there's the support. I'm sorry, I'm a lawyer, so it's a little tangled. But a lot of people say, this can't happen, can it, because of the Constitution? Could never happen, right? What about the Constitution? It couldn't happen under the Constitution. The problem is it's the Supreme Court of the United States that interprets the Constitution, and that the other second thing is that the decisions of the Congress to impeach judges is non-justiciable, meaning there's no appeal from that, which is why the Supreme Court nomination fights are the most brutal, passionate fights we have in our polity, because they need the court to do this. They know that, right? They need the court to do it. If they get the court, they can do it. You remember that when the first federal court decisions, they were so mad in abortion and contraception, some early gay rights decisions, federal courts overturned public referendums on marriage equality, and I forget which state it was first. Tom DeLay, who was the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, advocated that those federal judges should be impeached. The Constitution says you can only impeach a federal judge for high crimes and misdemeanors. But here's where we have a flaw in the Constitution. If the House impeaches and the Senate convicts, it's over. Whether they impeach him for a high crime or misdemeanor, or they impeach him because they don't like their decision. And in fact, the amount of scholarship on impeachment in the Christian right is, I say scholarship and pseudo-scholarship, is incredible. But in my book, impeachment plays an important role in how they implement the theocracy. Who has not spoken? Sorry, you haven't. Go ahead. Sorry.
See, prejudice there. One of the things that occurs to me when people say, you know, it couldn't happen here, or they're evangelical fundamentalists, their influence is easy enough to get through, especially in a social network like Facebook, if any of you are on that, for instance. There are a lot of people who believe in God that are not fundamentalists.
Correct.
So the fundamentalists are using just the word God. So in God we trust is taken off the money. You can't say God in school. You have to take blah, blah, blah. You see people on Facebook furious. And it's untrue things that are spread around, such as Pepsi used to have in God we trust on their cans. So everybody on Facebook is now furious at Pepsi. They're going to boycott Pepsi when it's not even true. But people, they're using the word God, so they're getting the attention of these young people that you think are not going to go to the root of fundamentalism. They could be brainwashed. It's not just complacency. There's a lot of brainwashing going on just with the word God. And they're not saying whether you're Jewish or Christian or Catholic or Protestant or whatever, the word God. And they can piss off a lot of people. And they do. And then they all join and they all fight in the same thing. You can have horrible arguments on Facebook over the simplest thing. And I don't think it's complacency. I think it's brainwashing.
That's a good point.
Greg, you have one more question.
This gentleman has been trying.
Yeah, I think you're right to bring up Sarah Palin. She's scared me a lot too, and still does. And also, I wasn't happy with McCain's religion. He's Southern Baptist. It's very subjugating towards women as well as a lot of other conservative views. But he didn't really seem to emphasize that much. But also, Rick Santorum, he was a senator from Pennsylvania for many years. And he came in second place in the Republican primaries, basically. And he said some things that are really scary that sound kind of fundamentalist and kind of like Christian Taliban kind of, in Syria kind of context. He's talked about putting God's law above man's law, and which can be very literal interpretation of a lot of the Bible. And also I'm interested in your view on Huckabee, because Huckabee's talked about starting a third party because he doesn't like the acceptance of gay marriage.
Yeah.
Well, you noticed that both Huckabee and Santorum were in the video. Huckabee was giving the spiritual warriors speech, and I didn't have a chance to get into this, but as you probably deduced from the video in my book, there is a civil war. I mean, because at the end of the day, we wouldn't tolerate, right? I mean, if these people took over Washington and they adopted a theocratic program, I mean, we would fight. I wouldn't. I mean, this gentleman said he'd move to Canada. I wouldn't move to Canada. I'd stay and fight.
Me too.
And that's what happens in the book. But violence, the violent undercurrent is amazing, and that was the Huckabee speech. And you're absolutely right about Rick Santorum, who, of course, I believe is a Roman Catholic, a very conservative Catholic, not an evangelical. And that actually underlines your point, which is that I focused on evangelicals, but actually Orthodox Jews, conservative Roman Catholics are quite aligned. That they're the people who get all hysterical about the word God, and yes, so Santorum is a good example of that. I can't tell you who's worse. Rick Perry, Santorum is worse. Okay, I mean, if you ever did, there was a prayer rally. I know that you noticed in the video, I cut between U.S. evangelical stadium prayer rallies and Nuremberg, back and forth, and not so subtle gesture, but it's scary stuff. I mean, stadium rallies. This is scary stuff, and especially when you hear what they're what they're saying. I forget the statistic was, at one point, it was 7 out of 11 of the full field of Republican presidential candidates were really in the crazy column, and it'll be interesting to see whether in 16 that's a higher or lower percentage. And you know we're in, well, I shouldn't say anything disrespectful of Mormons, but you know, when we put Romney not in the crazy column, you know, I mean, that's listen, let me say one other thing. Normally, you know, I would have had a bookseller here giving you books, and I would have been thrilled to sign them, but I'm told the library prohibits it. But I really would be grateful if you would read the book. It's only $9. You can download it from Amazon.
Is it downloadable?
It's ebook, $9 on Amazon. You can click
Is there
through
hard
if you.
copy also?
There's a hard copy. If there's an audio book, there's Audible. In fact, the wonderful actor who read the Audible book, terrific guy. So it's easy to get. There's indie books if you want to support your local bookstore. You know, you go on indie books, click, and then your local bookstore will deliver it to you. And if anybody really wants it signed, send it to me and I'll sign it and send it back.
An email contact for you?
Sure.
Ed'll help you out.
Ed has it, and I want to say seriously too that, you know, we talked about changing hearts and minds. I wrote this book to do that, and I'm not. Let me just, you know, the royalties from this book are not, you know, are not the reason I did this book, and it's had a tale. And so if you can read it and tell other people about it, it changes people. It really changes people to read this book.
Christmas gifts.
It would be a great,
Send it to everyone.
great Christmas gift. I'd be very grateful, and I'm always, you know, would be really thrilled to have your comments and thoughts by email after you've read it.
All right, thank you very much.